The drinker raises an excellent point, one of which that I've been wrestling with for a very long time, that, the PS3 to the PS5 era, it's kind of really languished in very little technological advancement. Yeah, because, okay, cool, just cast your mind back. I think, like, the last time I looked at the demographics, everybody's in on and around my age bracket. So, yeah, if you remember, let's play some remembering and do some remembering. You remember the NES, the Super Nintendo? You remember that jump from 8-bit to 16-bit? That was amazing, okay? That was transcendent. And then you want to go to the N64, the PlayStation, when they integrated disc technology? Holy crap, things really started cooking. And then hopping over to the PS2 era, I mean, that was absolutely mind-blowing, the things that could happen with 3D, okay? While in its infancy on the PlayStation and not the 360, rather, that'd be the next generation, but on the 64, and if you were one of those weird folks that had a Saturn, the promise of 3D realized on the PlayStation 2, the Xbox, and the GameCube, and then from there, things really took off with the PS3, the Xbox 360, and since then, haven't really advanced all that much. Like the PS4, Xbox One generation, kind of a whole bunch of nothing, and then PS5, it's like, when everything's all said and done on that generation, what memorable exclusives are going to be out there? It's like, gaming kind of peaked, honestly, early 2010s, right when PS3 and the 360 were reaching maturity, halfway through their life cycle, when they all started to push all of the gimmicks, your Move controllers, your PS Move, and your stupid, Xbox Kinect. Everybody remember, was it the Kinect? Yeah, it was the Kinect. That was going to be the big advancement, and things just really haven't gone much different from then, and it's really just highlighted with the slop that we have been seeing, yes, with The Last of Us remastered, and then The Last of Us Part 1 remastered. I mean, other than Ellie's face, and we're going from looking like a cute kid to just a sunken-eyed goof that would eventually deride bigot sandwiches, and then seeing in the background, you take a look at Joel going from, I don't know, somebody who's outside, filling the role of somebody, a few years removed from the apocalyptic event, now making his way through the world, to somebody a little bit more gruff around police officers with better uniforms. That's kind of crazy how that's the only real noticeable change, but you also realize that, I guess, with the PS5, the biggest thing was also getting rid of the snow technology. Kind of strange how that ends up working, but no. Naughty Dog, clearly, they have bigger priorities, they have higher priorities. They're working on something that is just so much bigger, and something that'll be so much better than The Last of Us Part 1. They're going to be working on The Last of Us TV show heading into the second season. And, well, it's kind of interesting, right? Because we're about a month removed. What is it? The 13th of April, season 2 comes out. And I still haven't watched any coverage of season 1. And I know people either, hate it because of a gay episode and 3 episodes into a 9-episode season. I can't even remember, man. It was a couple years removed. And there's still debate whether or not Bella Ramsey and her giant fucking head can actually act. But while there's some discussion whether or not season 1 is worth a damn, I think everybody's generally resigned to the fact that season 2, it's gonna suck. Especially if they're going to be adapting part 2, which, it's funny, right? I did a little bit of pre-screening in this Variety article, and they are very revisionist, but they're also very revelatory as to what to expect with season 2, and some of it's quite funny, actually. So, making The Last of Us Season 2, casting Abby, we'll get into that, video game changes, and why the creators are at peace with telling a different version of the story. Really? Because you also want to try to play both sides of this by adapting Neil Druckmann's magnum opus of The Last of Us Part 2. Then also realizing that, oh boy, that was a gigantic disaster that we only announced one time how many units we shipped, not how many games we sold, of that seminal piece of art. And how you were so loud and proud after the conclusion of Season 1 about faithfully adapting Season 2 to the first half of the second game. Why the change in tone? Why the change in tone for sure? But let's read some of this. I'm skipping, quite a bit of the first half of this article, mostly because it's just a pathetic amount of glazing from Neil Druckmann, rather. But they're talking about, the lead writers of the show, Craig Mazin and Neil Druckmann, knew that making season 2 would be a far more daunting endeavor, along with the usual pressures of following an overnight smash part 2 upends fundamental things fans loved about the first game. Yeah, like the great relationship that developed between Joel and Ellie that was totally and completely non-existent because Joel gets forward within the first 30 minutes of the game, unceremoniously. Like, there's quite a bit wrong with making that decision, but you can also go down that path if you have a deft hand and you know what you're doing, but Neil doesn't, obviously. He's really bad at his job. Creative force behind this and everything else at Naughty Dog, he ended up pushing aside because a strong male feminist has always got a strong male feminist by subverting the woman who actually does the good work and taking credit for them because they're a great ally. Anyways, it alienates Joel and Ellie from each player, pushes the story to jaw-dropping extremes, and fences players to empathize rather, not emphasize. There's other things that are going to be de-emphasized, but we'll get to that in due time, by playing as the game's central antagonist, Abby, who will be played by Dopesick Emmy nominee Caitlin Dever. Okay, whatever. I don't know what that is, but I know what a Caitlin Dever is. Somebody who looks nothing like Abby. Anyways, while Part 2 was lauded as one of the best games ever made when it debuted in June of 2020. I was around for that, and lauded as one of the best games ever? Who was doing that? Nobody was doing that. Some sycophant Access Media types, but outside of that, nobody remembers that game as anything other than just tripe, but okay. On top of all of that, Part 2 was such a colossal experience, taking almost twice as long to complete as Part 1. Yeah, because we had all of that misery to get through, that adapting it would necessitate telling the story over multiple seasons. Then, yeah, why did Pedro have to stick around so long? And if the game is so universally loved when it first came out, why are you telling a different story now if Season 1 was so faithful to the original game? Weird. None of that fazed Mazin. If anything, it made him more eager to get to work. One of the notes that I resent the most is, "We love this thing. More of it, please." And he said, "No, you love it because that's the right amount of it. When you do more, what makes it special starts to dissipate." Let me repeat here for a second. Part 2 was such a colossal experience, taking almost twice as long to complete as Part 1. No, you love it because there's a right amount of it. All right. And if there's one thing about The Last of Us, it's not comfortable. Especially the second game, because it's all about cycles of violence and how the only way to win the game is to not play. Oh my god, it's so deep and meaningful. Druckmann leans forward. Not too far off of his chair, though, because he needs to make sure that fist stays affixed to the seat. Turning a thought around in his head. Well, there's plenty of space in there. There's nothing that's going to get in its way. I hope this doesn't sound arrogant. Oh my god, it's coming from you, Neil. Of course it's going to sound arrogant, but I think you have to have a certain level of success to have the confidence to do what we're doing. Oh my god, this is hilarious in the grander concepts, or in the grander context of this, both in the game and in the show, because on paper, it looks so risky, but this is where you love working with Craig, because he thinks like me. Sometimes you have a feeling to the story, and it has to be this and only this, and you just have to commit. But even as somebody who, I've said it before, I played the original Last of Us when it first came out. Fantastic experience. Very much appreciated it at the time. It's kind of waned in recent years, and I might have to go back to really experience it, but I'm not buying a remaster because I'm not supporting Naughty Dog in today's day and age. You can go straight to hell. And I'd got to hook up a PS3, and it's it just seems more trouble than it's worth. But yeah, maybe I'll go back and, refresh myself with, the story, because that's a real selling point, because the gameplay was nothing really to write home about. But I've watched quite a bit of gameplay on Part 2, and yeah, I experienced its quote-unquote story for what it was, and yeah, I know quite a bit about it, and it's really bad. So to see it adapted once again, or to see it changed, it's well, it could do with a lot of changes, but do I expect any quality in changes, especially when the brain trust involves the guy who brought us the first one? It's I don't know, man. I think it's just going to be another dog pile of shit. And one of the big changes I see right here, I think it's very interesting, okay, because because the moment that I seen this picture, it's like, okay, so you got, oh my God, Bella Ramsey, who looks, okay, cool. We'll go ahead and pull the screenshot up here again. Okay, there's Ellie, looking really Ellie, and you got Bella Ramsey. Oh, we talk quite a bit about, making certain changes, especially from Western gaming companies, making their female protagonists more ugly than they need to. Do we need to go any further on that? But who's she sitting next to? Okay, and as somebody who has a decent amount of familiarity with part 2, it's like, is that supposed to be Dina? But Dina's supposed to be one of them girls. Why is she portrayed by Isabella Merced? Oh yeah, no, she's definitely Dina. And it's like, oh, you're making some interesting casting changes, but that's of course not the only one. In fact, we got Abby there, who's looking not very Abby at all whatsoever. Okay, Caitlin Dever wanted to work with us. We wanted to work with her. It's not worth passing up to continue a search that might never bear fruit to find someone that matches the physicality. Talking about, the violence markedly cut down from the game, the showrunner says the need for Abby to be so imposing wasn't as critical. Yeah, it's mostly because you took a look around, Neil, who said that it was totally reasonable for somebody to look like Scott Steiner in the post-apocalypse with a set of titties, or what passes as titties. You said that you were a bigot for pointing it out otherwise. All of a sudden, now she looks like a much more reasonable chick? Interesting, because the physicality is going to be toned down. So is Joel going to end up getting golf clubbed or not? Because that's going to be interesting. Especially when this Abby goes to swing a 5-iron and then it just makes a little squeaky noise like an inflatable hammer. And goofy-ass Pedro Pascal just has a bruise next to his mustache instead of, properly having his head caved in. It's going to be, it's definitely going to be different. But it's very funny, your admission that you have right there. But then there's also another one, okay, and that's pointed out by Bounding Into Comics. The Last of Us co-creator Neil Druckmann says HBO series will tell a different version of Part 2 story. And then, with all of the success that's out there from the game and from the TV show that was watched by a bunch of people, trust me, they can still recount and they'll tell you about their love for that first season 2 years on. Trust me, bro, we can definitely find them. That the fans should not expect a third game. The game that was so successful, and then it was just you chuds not being able to cope with a strong female protagonist, even though you take a look at one of the games that just released this weekend, Split Fiction. Now, I'm recording this Thursday evening, so this is just within the first few hours of its release, and you got this Split Fiction game, which coincidentally also comes from EA, which also just recently released Dragon Age: The Veilguard. Well, recent is a interesting term to use in regards to the Veilguard, because it just recently got put out for free on the PS Plus subscription service. But I thought all of the bigots out there that, just hated The Last of Us Part 2 because it had 2 female protagonists, didn't like to play games with female protagonists, and the avatar for the most successful game out there right now, Monster Hunter Wilds, is still cracking consistently 6-digit player counts, and you got Split Fiction out here from a big bombastic production studio like Electronic Arts, cracking in at 30,000 players on release ahead of its debut weekend. Spare me the dramatics, but to get into the cope, in seeking to correct what he describes as a superficial nature of The Last of Us Part 2's narrative, franchise co-creator Neil Druckmann, says the upcoming season of HBO's live-action adaptation will not present the one-to-one adaptation of the game, but rather a different version of that story. The current Naughty Dog studio head revealed this creative decision while speaking to Variety's Adam B. Very. Yes, we're going to a summary of that very long article. I mean, I could go ahead and show you just on the scroll and just also take a look at how much stuff we ended up skipping on this one. I mean, it's a really huge puff piece for a show that ended up having kind of it had an impact, and it definitely had a viewership. I just don't really know how well season 2 is going to do, and I think even the showrunners know that it's not going to do very well in a second season if they end up directly adapting a game that was so incredibly contentious. Universally appraised as one of the best games ever upon release. Asked if they held any concern regarding the ability to for the show to satisfy both the viewers of the already played through Last of Us Part 2 and the TV-only audiences. Yes, particularly in regards to Joel's eventual fate. Which should, if they're going to be following one-to-one like they did with Season 1. Joel's actual daughter died at the end of the first episode. Joel should end up dying about 3/4 of the way through the first episode of season 2, but we're not telling that same story. Funny how things change. There are things where we don't have the element of surprise, perhaps the way the games did. Yeah, interesting cope on this one. They said a lot of people who played the first game understood that Joel's daughter was going to die very quickly in the first episode. Wait, okay, so now you're saying, okay, cool, so we could go ahead and adapt the first game because people played the game, but we can't go ahead and adapt the second game because... What are you admitting there? What are you admitting there, Joel? Sorry, not Joel, Neil. Sorry, it's a name synonymous with cuckdom, especially in this second season and second game. Those people weren't surprised. They felt it because it's the journey. Yeah, but it still is arguably the most emotionally hard-hitting event throughout the entirety of the first game. Like, I still remember the conclusion of that of the first game, even 12 years on at this point in time, and yeah, it hits hard, but shock of having Joel escape with his daughter, and you could kind of piece it together because when you're not lying in your advertisements, especially with the first game as compared to the second one, you knew that Joel's daughter, well, at least, I don't know, maybe it's a journey to go and get her back or something like that, but you knew something bad was going to happen. But the way that it did, it's very traumatic, and it's definitely a good hook to get you to play the rest of the game. But to try to say you can't do something similar for your main character this time around, maybe it's an admission that what you did to Joel in part 2, it was very much a mistake. To this end, the discussion then turned to HBO series' decision to break from part 2's original story and introduce Eugene Linden, a former member of the Fireflies who served alongside Joel's brother Tommy, who in game is only mentioned in passing, set to play by Matrix star, Joe Pantoliano. Now, I know him as Ralph Cifaretto from The Sopranos, but 6 of one, half dozen of the other. So if he goes out there and he caves Dina's skull in, at least we know that he'll have an excuse for it. Number 1, she was a whore. Number 2, well, I get excited when I see these opportunities, said Druckmann. I'm sure you do, Neil. Just 2 inches of excitement. Can't wait. I'm like, I don't know Eugene that well. The story we told in the game was somewhat superficial. The way the character comes in really gets to the heart of Joel and Ellie and their relationship. But I thought you really loved this universally acclaimed story that you didn't want to deviate from it. Anyways, taking a beat to compliment his writing partner's willingness to modify the original story, the live-action series co-creator Craig Mazin then praised Druckmann, of course. You are unique in this way, and I'm deeply grateful for it. Oh my God, just kiss already. Words I can't say on YouTube. He understands the value of invention, reinterpretation, addition, change. Much so that we're never going to see another Last of Us game, which, oh no, ain't that sad. And though not specifically related to the topic of the game to screen accuracy, it should be noted that at the end of their time together, Druckmann seemingly torpedoed the possibility of The Last of Us Part 3. Telling very. When asked about the matter, I guess the only thing I would say is I don't bet on there being more of The Last of Us. This could be it. Oh no, but I thought the game was such a universal success, and that is, one of the biggest, Sony exclusive IPs that's out there. I guess all of their creative endeavors are going to be moving towards intergalactic. Boy, if the writing has ever been on the wall that Naughty Dog is going to be one of the next studios to fall victim of the get woke, go broke life cycle of modern Western development, that right there, that's the admission that's eventually going to bear fruit a couple years down the line. Can't wait for Intergalactic. Can't wait for Season 2, April 13th. We'll see how much they deviate from Part 2, because we already know that Abby, Big Abby Pump, she's no longer the hookup. But are we going to be able to book our tea times for April 13th, or are we going to have to wait a little while longer, probably till the end of the season? I would have to imagine. So with all that said, thank you all very much for the gift of your time. I've been Don Consuelo. I want you to follow your gut and get after it. Take care, everyone.